How's it going, everybody? This is going to be my first, well, sort of my first, personal, like, kind of one-on-one self-help video. So let's just kind of jump right into it. I'm basically kind of freestyling this, but I have come up with a lot of good techniques of the universe and exploitation of all sorts of things. I used to basically just kind of start with like exploitation of, the computer and video games, and then it just kind of led into all sorts of other random things. And this is basically a little trick that you can basically use to understand the science of being happy, basically. So this video is going to be about man, see, I'm kind of freestyling it, so I'm a little bit at loss of words because there's kind of so many different things that I can bring into my videos that I'm just trying to cherry pick one thing at a time, and put the right things in there. So in this video, we're going to talk about how creating happiness is basically a skill and a technique, and it's a habit. So that's it's good news and bad news. The good news is you can create happiness. You can make it happen, and it's not necessarily always so accidental as it does seem to sometimes feel and kind of sometimes happen. The bad news about about that is, happiness is a habit. So if you don't tend to break into that sort of habit, you may never you may never break into that habit, and you may never really find yourself to be very happy. So basically, what you want to do is you're going to have to. There's all sorts of ways to create happiness and find happiness. Sometimes it just kind of depends on the time, the moment, and the mood of things, and sometimes it's the way I see it is you could basically do something more than once over and over, and then it's always gonna somehow always end up being a little bit different, which is what I kind of found it to be pretty, phenomenal myself, how like everything is always the same and different at the same time. And it's like, man, if you just do something even 1 second later or 1 minute later, how it can just be completely different. So first of all, there isn't very many limits to on how to make it happen, but mainly the main thing that you have to learn about how to create happiness and how to be happy. And this kind of ties into not having a bad day, not having bad feelings, and feeling good, and just being in a good mood. And then just everyone's had those days where some days are bad, some days are good, and it's because your mind and your brain is experiencing things that that can only be experienced during that moment, during that time. So depending on that moment, depending on that time, you're at the mercy of that moment in that time. So one of the things most people need to realize is it's kind of like a seasonal change or a shift. So you kind of have to shift into it and move into it. And it isn't necessarily always going to be something that you can, just snap your fingers and it's just automatically going to happen. Because it's kind of a little bit like rolling up up a snowball and it just gets bigger and bigger. But that goes both ways. So, your depressional states kind of roll up like a snowball and they get bigger and bigger. So, if you kind of find yourself to be in that state where you're feeling bad and you basically have to do the opposite. You have to break down that snowball, and as that snowball has been building up, getting bigger and bigger, and it's just getting worse and worse, you basically have to reverse that and unroll that and get rid of that. You got to be on the other side. You have to roll up the happiness part. So first and foremost, it's important to understand, if you have that big giant snowball built up of unhappiness, first things first, you're going to have to break it down. You're going to have to get rid of that negative energy and force in your life. And depending on how long or how big of a snowball you have built up, holding you back, preventing you and stopping you, it could take more time, the bigger the problem is. Okay, so that's another thing. Depending on what the problem is, you're kind of at the mercy of what the problem may be. So the good news is, if you can kind of take a step back and then just kind of see what's happening and what's not happening, you can kind of shape that snowball like a laser and then craft it and shape it yourself. So most of the time, you kind of have that snowball rolling and rolling, and it's kind of automatically rolling, and you don't really have much directional and force of whether it's rolling up against you or rolling up for you, and you just kind of tend to naturally go with the flow, and you just kind of tend to end up where you end up. But if you kind of can take a step back and see the science behind, how it's all happening, you can you can direct it to work in your favor. But it's a skill, so it takes a little bit of practice, and it takes a little bit of time to actually be able to utilize and work with. So the way you kind of want to see this is, basically the more unhappy and depressed you are, the harder it's going to be be happy. And there's no way around that. You can't, there is no way around that. Because if something's there, it's there. Okay, so you can't basically just ignore it and pretend that it's not there. Now that you realize, the way that this is working, and it's up to you to identify, what's there and what's not there, and it's your job to get rid of that negative snowball that's preventing you to, get happier, become happier. Now, I kind of found some exploits behind this on, how does it work against you and how does it work for you. So I'll give you some good examples of how things are going to work for you and kind of work against you. Now, I do tend to find, that most of my explanations, kind of take with a grain of salt. Don't predefine it as it's completely set in stone. You just want to kind of smooth it out, and then take what you can that is actually useful and that makes sense of it for your own self. All right, so if you aren't able to make sense of something that I am bringing forth on the plate, just work with the things that you are able to take off of the plate. You don't have to take everything off of the plate. Okay, if you can and it helps you, fine. I do tend to find that people kind of freak out if they can't be having a plate served to them to where every single thing on it, that they can just have it and consume it. So what I tend to, what I found with, when I look back at my experiences and basically the simulations of what makes me happy and what doesn't make me happy, this is where I'm going to kind of break in some scientifical, tricks and tips to, make it happen, and then how it doesn't happen. Now, first things first, we have billions of people in the world, so everybody's a little bit different. So, just because something works for me, it may not work for you. So, I'm just going to be able to give everybody the skill set and idea and technique to where you may have to come up with your own idea. And a lot of times that's what will create happiness for your own self, is your own idea, what makes sense for you, okay? And that kind of is going to tie into what I was going to break into saying next, which is basically, for me, what I tend to always have found to where I've always had the most enjoyment and happiness and excitement out of my life is being in control of my life, okay? Doing what I want to do, and that's basically what I tend to found that is most likely one of the biggest root causes that creates happiness. All right, you got to do what you want to do. Don't let other people hold you back and stop you and tell you, hey, don't do this, don't do that. And then in the back of your mind, you're sitting there thinking like, oh man, these people are telling me not to do that. And then it's like, and I have no problem with doing it, and then I enjoy it. And then you're basically listening to other people. So for me, I found that doing what I want to do and being able to listen to myself and talk to my own self with my own ideas is where I was always most happy with myself, most satisfied with myself, and even to this day, the way I am. I just, being in control of myself and what I want to do, what I want to decide, what I want to think, what I want to listen to, what I want to do, what I want to say, that's what makes me happy. So you basically have to avoid, if other people don't want to do what you want to do, they don't want to do what you want to do, that's probably not the person you want to be hanging around. Because if you can't do what you want to do, you're not going to be happy. So first things first, you got to get rid of those people out of your life that don't want to join in with you and do what you want to do. Now, it doesn't mean that you're one-sided and you're just predominant and it's always got to be what you want to do, because there's nothing stopping you from doing what you want to do, even if it's what someone else wants to do. Because it's like, hey, if that's what someone else wants to do, it doesn't mean that that's going to mean that that's not what you want to do. Somebody can do what they want to do, and you could still be doing what you want to do. Okay? So first and foremost, if you want to be happy, make sure you're doing what you want to do. Don't hang around people. Don't talk to people. Don't listen to people if there isn't a good reason. And that's what makes it a good reason or not a good reason. If somebody's trying to tell you to do something and it's not what you want to do, then that's not the person you should listen to. Okay? And I've been watching all sorts of videos, and I'm kind of cherry picking some things that other people have kind of explained and taught me. So one things that I recently heard was on this YouTube channel of how he was saying how, it's stupid to, listen to other people that aren't more successful than you are. And that tends to be what I see is happening a lot, is there are people that are not necessarily very successful, or they don't even necessarily have very much even going for them, and yet they're going to give out advice and tell other people to do things. Okay, and that's kind of human nature to want to just kind of tell people what to do and try to throw out ideas. So it's not like they're trying to deliberately be a bad person more often than not, but it's still something you have to be protective of. Basically, don't listen to other people. Okay? Not unless what they're saying is like making sense to you. But I tend to find a lot of times, like, what's happening when other people are going to go talking to you is they're one-sided. They're not necessarily very interested in your perspective or your feelings or your ideas, and let alone they're not necessarily even connected to your ideas, feelings, and what you think. So they tend to be really pushy about it, and then one-sided, and they're just kind of like, oh, it's like this, it's like that. And if anything goes against what it's like this or like that, it creates a problem. Because remember, true happiness comes from doing what you want to do, and that's where they're finding their happiness, is by doing what they want to do. And that's why they're doing what they want to do, is because that's what's making them happy. So at the same time, they're doing what they want to do and they're making themselves happy. That doesn't mean that they're giving good advice or they're doing anything very beneficial. So you got to just be aware of that. Like, hey, just because, this person's saying, hey, do this, do that, or it will work, or it's going to work, it doesn't guarantee and mean like, oh, that ties into the whole saying. If someone tells you to jump off a bridge, are you gonna go jump off a bridge? Of course not, because the more noticeable it is that it's like doesn't make sense, the more that you just throw it out. So normally when you're listening to other people, they're kind of, you don't really notice that they're coming at you with such bad ideas, because they're trying. And that's why, it's not like you want to be mad at them, but, at the same time, it would be a little bit nicer if they were actually more sure of themselves and they were more aware of what they are actually getting at and what they're saying. And that's what I tend to find, is you're not going to be able to find happiness by listening to other people that don't make sense, and then don't listen. If you're listening to other people and then they don't tend to make sense, don't try to make it make sense. Okay, if it makes sense, then there shouldn't even really be anything that has to be done, or it's automatically going to make sense or not make sense. So most people, they try to fight themselves to, when they listen to what someone says, they need it to make sense. They make it make sense because, well, they said it, so they must know what they're saying and they got to be right. So when someone listens to the wrong person, they're basically psyching themselves out, and then they get this whole idea that they have to go with what that person has said and come up with, because that other person has said and come up with what they've come up with for whatever reason it may be. But remember, doing what you want and saying what you want is what makes you happy. So that's what's making them happy. So when they're saying what they want, doing what they want, they're naturally going to be happy with it. Whether or not you can even make sense of it, or whether or not you even have any sort of benefit out of it. It doesn't matter. If that's what they want to say, and if that's what they want to make sense out of, and that's what they want to do, it's going to make sense to that person, and it may only make sense to that person. So you got to stop basically trying to battle yourself and trying to make sense out of what other people are telling you to do, and understand and believe. Unless there's a good enough reason. I tend to find that most of the time people are going to try to tell you what to do and tell you, how to think. They don't even have a good enough reason. Like I didn't even ask anybody, and then it's like, why is someone trying to tell me what to do? See, if I were to ask somebody, it'd be a different story. They would actually have a good enough reason to, kind of tell me what to do. But most of the time when people are telling people what to do and you're listening to other people, they don't necessarily have a good enough reason. Now, most of the time when you're just talking to random people, they tend to be your friends, and that's different, because normally your friends are a lot more on point. But we're talking with meeting new friends and meeting new people, and then you barely even know who they are, and you're listening to them. It's like, don't listen to people you don't even know. Alright? Don't listen to somebody that you barely even just met. Why are you listening to someone you barely even just met? Barely even know? That's basically gonna wrap up my first video, and I'm still kind of practicing, making my videos a little bit more professional and higher quality. But that's gonna be my first video on how to create happiness. Hope that helps everybody. I don't want to keep repeating myself, because I think in this video we've basically brought down to the main point on where to kind of start with and what to kind of look out for. So I'll create some more videos, because this is kind of a shallow video, but I think it does provide a lot of insight for a lot of people to come up with some good ideas, and it's really going to be beneficial for a lot of people out there. So and like I say, with this video, it doesn't mean to just become a Nazi and then just fucking, shut everybody out and then fucking never listen to anybody. That's not necessarily what I mean, but it's a matter of being a little bit, having a stronger filter and being a little bit more aware and observant, okay? So I challenge you to basically conceive it, what other people are saying to you in your own mind, and then honestly, just be simple about it. Yes or no. Is what that person is saying making sense or not? And if you can't honestly just simply answer, okay, what they are saying makes sense, don't listen. Don't listen. Don't waste your time.